Hi, my name is Danielle Crease and I'm going to be your trainer for the hip flexor tutorial. But before I get into any of that, I'm just going to introduce myself real quick. So right now I'm living in Southern Oregon in Talent, the Rogue Valley. I'm a coach over at Orange Theory Fitness and I'm also a personal trainer. I've been in love with fitness and exercise for as long as I could possibly remember, but it wasn't until I almost lost my life as well as my leg and became paralyzed in a boating accident that I really started to feel full gratitude for the power of the body and the ability for movement to not only benefit us physically, but mentally and emotionally as well as we go through different stages of our lives. So because of that, I found myself here, worked my way through everything, and now I'm here to give you a couple of tips on hip flexors. So hip flexors are the muscles that cross over the hips. Basically, they're all the glute muscles, inner thighs, hamstring, as well as the psoas. So the main role of a hip flexor is to stabilize the pelvis and the thigh bone as we go into movement, which, as you can think of, we do literally all the time. So essentially, our hip flexors are the source of all of our efficient movement. And unfortunately, in the society that we live in now, we tend to live more sedentary. So whether we're working at our computers for extended hours on end or whatever the case may be, we tend to have shortened or tightened hip flexors because of that lifestyle that we lead now. So it's important that we not only strengthen them, but we also work on stretching and lengthening them as well to fully build a well-rounded hip flexor so we could move as efficiently as possible. So even for us athletes, or for any athletes that do repetitive movement or constantly focus on those bigger muscles, this is going to be paramount for you as well, because even though you're focusing on those bigger muscles and you're strong, your hip flexors may be weakened because you're not paying attention to that. You're going into repetitive movements such as running, and without realizing it, you are contributing to those weakened hip flexors. So you could work on that as well, because we don't want to add and contribute to any imbalance in the body. And just remember, if you work out for 1 hour a day, that's about 4% of your entire day. So you have to really think about how you spend the rest of your time and kind of gauge where your body is at and what you could do to benefit it. So before further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started with our warm-up. First, we're going to start with the dead bug. So we're going to go ahead and go onto our backs, bending the knees at a 90-degree angle and bringing them over the hips. You're going to make sure your hips are tucked under so your back is flat against the mat, and you're going to engage the core, drawing in the navel to the spine. Now you're going to hold one hand against the leg that's going to remain bent. So you're providing a little bit of resistance and tension the entire time, even though that leg isn't moving. So then you are going to come extending the arm and extending the leg out, bringing the arm back to raising. So you're getting a bit of extension as well as strengthening, warming up and activation through the contraction of that leg. You're also providing a little bit of strengthening in the opposite leg by not allowing it to kind of lose its tension as it's pushing against the arm. So a tip here would be to keep the feet dorsiflexed so that the entire leg remains engaged throughout that movement. So that's going to be your first warm-up exercise. So our next warm-up is going to be a side plank. So we're going to drop down to the mat. We're also going to incorporate a knee drive so that it's not just focusing on the core, but you're starting to engage the psoas and all the muscles around the hip flexors as well. So you want to make sure that your elbow stays in line with your shoulder so that you're not putting unnecessary tension on the joint. You're going to bring your hips up, making sure you're in a straight line. You're then going to bring the arm overhead and drive the knee to the arm, bringing the elbow and the knee together. So you're really getting some great engagement in that hip flexor as you're contracting the arm and the leg. Option here, if you need to, would be to bend the knee, kind of coming into a bit of a figure four. You're going to use that knee as stabilization, and then you could proceed into that knee drive and still get some really great activation of the hip flexors. So our next move is a great warm-up move, and it's a bit of a flow. So we're going to be working with range of motion in our hips. So this is going to be great for any power lifters or strength trainers, whatever it may be, because you do need to work with that range of motion so that the whole body could coordinate and work as one efficiently for you to achieve those power moves. So I'm actually going to show you on this side. Come into your downward dog, making sure your core is nice and engaged. You're gonna extend the leg up and open up those hips, really allowing the hips to open. It should feel really good. This is a nice part. Then moving fluidly into your plank, bringing your knee to your chest, and then extending it out to the side. Bringing it back into the chest, opening, and then coming back to your starting position. So you could perform that continuously on one side, or you could alternate. So another flow that's going to really work with our range of motion of the hips is going to be one we're going to start off in tabletop. So you want to make sure that your wrists are in line with your shoulders. You never want your arms kind of out forward, again putting unnecessary stress on those shoulder joints. So make sure everything's in alignment. You want your core tucked, your hips tucked under. You don't want to be extended out. And you're going to engage the back foot. So keep the back foot dorsiflexed so that really engages the entire leg. So you're going to engage, come up into a donkey kick, open into a fire hydrant, and then come into a lateral kick before you swing it around and drop the foot. You could continue this on one side, or you could alternate. But it's really going to start moving that range of motion in your hips and waking everything up. So now we're going to start our strength moves. We're going to bring in a couple pieces of equipment to help us with this first one. Now you could grab a bench, a chair, or as you can see what I have here is actually a log from my backyard. And then we're also going to use a mini band. So you're going to come down to the ground and wrap the mini band around your feet, close to the ankles. You then want to bring your feet up onto that bench or that log, whatever it is that you're using, and you're going to extend down onto your back. You're then going to lift the hips, so you could use your arms to help with this lift, and you're just going to, in a nice controlled fashion, bring that band and drive that knee to the chest. Option here would be to come onto the ground. You could always lift up into a bridge, and you could do a march in your bridge as well. So make sure you keep those glutes engaged. You want to feel it through your hamstrings as well as strengthening those hip flexors. So you're getting a little bit of balance, a little bit of stabilization, and a little bit of strength with that move. So our next move is similar to that last one, but you're going to be standing, which actually adds a little bit of a challenge because there's an increased balance component to this move. So not only will you be engaging your hip flexors, but you'll be engaging your core as well. So whenever you're standing and doing anything really, you always want to try to maintain a slight bend of the knee. There are very few instances in which you need to be locked out, so make sure you have a slight bend so you're not putting any unnecessary stress on those joints. So you're going to drop down and place the band around the feet. So again, soft knees, tight core though, so make sure you're drawing in the navel to your spine and you're tucking the hips under. Your butt shouldn't be popping out, your glutes shouldn't be, your back shouldn't be in that extension. You should be tucked under and engaged. So as soon as you find that balance, you're going to just simply lift the foot up. So again, you could load all onto one side, or you could alternate. So your goal here is to not only balance, but to keep it controlled. You don't want the band to control you. You want to control the band. And when you use the band, not only are you getting great strength movement, but you're also hitting some of those stabilizers, some of those smaller muscles, so that you're getting a more well-rounded workout instead of just hitting the major muscles. Our next move is going to be a power move, and if you'd like, because we're kind of hitting some of our major muscles in order to exert the power, you could probably pick a tougher band. So you're going to wrap the band around the feet or over the feet, and you're going to bring it up to just above the knee. Now, whenever you're using a band, your main goal is going to be to hold tension. That's where you're going to get those stabilizing muscles as well as your major muscles. So your goal throughout this entire thing is always to make sure that you're almost externally rotated. You don't want to be collapsing in because the band is adding some resistance for you. So that's going to be one of your goals, which is also going to, again, work on those hip flexors. So we're going to come into a banded squat jump. So you're going to send those hips back, dropping down, and then you're going to jump up from your heels in order to get into that squat jump. So you're not moving through your toes as you're landing, you're still sending those hips back. You also want to make sure that you're landing with your knees soft. So as you're coming down, your knees are bending with you. Again, not only are you getting some power work, getting those quick fibers in your body, but you're also getting in some stabilizing muscles by maintaining the tension with that band. Our next move is going to be a single leg deadlift. I chose to do single leg versus the standard deadlift because I wanted to incorporate some unilateral work. Oftentimes for these major moves, we use both sides of our body, and it kind of creates this sense of lack of body awareness, really. We don't realize if one side of our body is weaker than the other, and we don't realize if there's any imbalance. So by doing single side work, you're kind of bringing more body awareness to yourself, and you're also able to remedy that natural imbalance we all kind of have. So I'm going to be working with a single kettlebell right now for this move, but you could incorporate 2 kettlebells, holding them on either side, or you could also use a band by simply placing the band underneath the foot, creating tension by holding it tightly, and then coming into your deadlift. So in order to do this single leg deadlift, you want to have a staggered stance. So just like a standard deadlift, you want to make sure your core is nice and engaged and that your hips are tucked. You don't want to be extended out. So make sure you're nice and tucked, standing nice and proud, and you're going to send those hips back. So you get to the point in which you start to feel tension in the back of the leg. There's really no reason for you to completely be dropping that chest down. You only want to bring it about parallel to the ground. As soon as you feel that tension, you're imagining pulling from the back of the leg in order to come back into that full extension and that standing position. So dropping down, sending the hips back, feeling that tension in the back of the leg, and then coming up into your standing position. So a couple of tips for that one. You want to make sure that as you drop down, your neck stays in line with your spine. So there's no need to be cranking your neck up, even if you want to look at yourself. You're going to be putting unnecessary stress on the cervical spine, so make sure everything is in some nice alignment. Also, you want to make sure that the weight stays close to the body. So you don't want the weight to be extended far out in front of you, because at that point you're going to be pulling from your lower back and you risk injury. So therefore, make sure the weight stays close, make sure your neck and your spine stay in alignment, and really focus on the engagement of the back of the legs and that extension, which is going to strengthen your hip flexors as you come into that standing position. So our next move is a sumo squat, and this could be done with or without weight. So I'm going to grab my kettlebell, but you could choose which modality you kind of want to use in order to achieve this move. So in order to come into a sumo squat, you go into exactly the same position as what it would sound like. You want to think about a sumo, so your feet are going really wide. Your feet are also turning out, opposed to being straight, which is what normal squats would call for. So you could either hold the weight down, or you could add a little bit of upper body tension by holding it at your chest. And you're just going to drop, still making sure that you're sending your hips back. You don't want your knees to be traveling or you to be falling forward in front of your body. So not only does this work your quads, but you're getting an opening and an engagement of the hip flexors. So coming into that sumo squat starts to activate a bit of the inner thigh a little bit more, which always contributes to the greater hip flexor complex. Our next move is going to be a kettlebell swing. Not only is this a full body move, not only does it hit cardio, but it also adds a lot of power in that extension that we come into as we finish off the move. And we also get that contraction at that hip hinge as we're coming down. So there are a couple things to keep you as safe as possible with the kettlebell swing. You want your feet a little bit more than hip width apart, and you want to think about keeping the weight close to your body opposed to dropping it down. So you always want to keep it really close. as you're dropping down, you want to think about hinging, literally hinging at the hips, and that chest coming down parallel to the ground. So you also want to make sure that you use the momentum to your advantage. There are many moves in which we call for control of the movement. We don't want you to be swinging, but in this case, the swinging motion is your friend. It's going to allow you to increase your weight when you want to, and it's going to just give you some more oomph for that move in order to create a little bit of a power component and a cardio component. So keep that weight close and thrust the hips, squeezing the glutes as you come into that kettlebell swing. Arms don't need to come higher than your shoulder. So really squeezing, keeping that weight close. So that's going to be your kettlebell move, focusing on the entire body as well as those hip flexors. Our next move is going to be a burpee, which is definitely a power move, definitely brings a lot of strength, quick twitch fibers in our hip flexor complex, activates all of those, but instead of coming into a plank, we're actually going to come into a bit of a hip extension. So we're going to be not only strengthening and bringing a power component, but we're also going to be elongating a little bit, which should feel nice while you're in the move. So you're going to come into your standard burpee, but you're going to allow the hips to drop. Now, normally we want that nice, strong plank, but in this case, you're gonna allow a bit of that extension, allow those hips to drop, get some elongation of those muscles, and then from there, you come up into your jump. So not only are you stretching the core a little bit, elongating those ab muscles, but you're also elongating your psoas and those hip flexors. We have another move here in which you'd be able to use a log, a bench, a chair, whatever it is that you feel comfortable stepping up onto and feel secure and safe in. So we're going to come into a step up with a back lunge. So you want to come into your step up. You're going to bring your knee to about hip height so that you can work on a bit of that balance and control. Then you're going to drop back down and come into your back lunge. So when you're in this back lunge, not only are you working the hip flexor of the bent knee, but you're also elongating the back leg, which should feel really nice. Coming into a bit of that balance and that control, and then dropping in to a back lunge, getting a little bit of lengthening in the back leg. Next, we're going to be coming into our Bulgarian split squat, and like the back lunge that we had after that step up, you're going to get a strengthening in one side and an elongation in the other side, which should feel really nice. So you want to make sure that on that back foot, your top of your foot is facing down against the bench or the log or the chair or whatever it is that you're able to use. You want to step up so that when you drop down, that knee is in line with your toes. You're not traveling too far forward so that you keep your knee safe as well. So then you're going to come up. As you can see, there's that elongation and then dropping straight back down. Now, the great thing about all of these moves is that you could use a bunch of different materials, whether it's dumbbells, kettlebells, bands, body weight, whatever it may be. And you could also play with your reps, you could play with timed intervals, and you could also play with your tempo. So work on going really slow and controlled for some of them. Others, you may have a really power move, or you may be working on your endurance with higher reps. So you kind of have that opportunity to play around and always keep your body guessing, changing, adapting, and growing. So I hope that helped you. I hope you have a wonderful workout and incorporate some of these into your routine.